Free Bird is the song that well and truly cemented Lynyrd Skynyrd into rock history. However, Ronnie Van Zant himself originally thought it wouldn't be a hit, and I'd be inclined to agree with him. It really shouldn't have been. This is the story of how Free Bird defied the odds and became an anthem of southern rock. Now, Lynyrd Skynyrd formed in 1964 in the most American way possible, at a baseball game in Jacksonville, Florida. Named after their gym teacher, Lynyrd Skynyrd, who they all hated, the band soon became a well-organised unit. And yes, it's Lynyrd Skynyrd, by the way, not Lynyrd Skynyrd, and we know that because of their debut album, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. Singer Ronnie Van Zant became the unelected leader of the band, him being a bit of a perfectionist with a clear vision of what he wanted to sound like. And guitarists Alan Collins and Gary Rossington formed a valuable partnership. Me and Alan played all the time. Even when we weren't practicing with the band, we would play together at his house. The band's rehearsal space was a tin-roofed shack, nicknamed the Hell House, which would get uncomfortably hot in the Florida heat. This shack would become home to some of Lynyrd Skynyrd's greatest, if not slightly sweaty, work. One day, Collins rocked up to the Hell House with the bare bones of a song he had come up with. Now, at first, Van Zant wasn't convinced. It seemed too complex. It was only after he made Collins play it again and again that he was able to begin to string together some lyrics and a melody. Alan had these chords, and he'd play them over and over. But at first, Ronnie thought there were too many chord changes to write lyrics to. This time, Ronnie said, "Play that again." Alan played the chords, then I'd play them, and Ronnie just sat there and wrote the lyrics. A love song. How we were travelling on the roads. We hadn't really made it yet. We were playing everywhere we could play. It wasn't so heavy or nothing to us at first. So at first, the band didn't see anything particularly special about this song. Nonetheless, they introduced it to their set list. It was only when they played it for the first time at the Southside Women's Club in Jacksonville that they realised its potential. Now, it's important to know that at this point they hadn't written the famous guitar solo that sees the song out for the final 4 minutes of the track. It was just the slow bit at the start of the song. And despite this, the band was still met with a hugely positive response when they played it on stage, and it soon became a regular part of their set. They recorded a demo of this version, which totaled only about 4 minutes, which of course was a far cry from the final version. If I leave here tomorrow. That famous solo only came about, if you can believe, because of Ronnie Van Zant's sore throat. We started playing it, just the slow part, at clubs. Then after a few sets, Ronnie would say, "Play a little longer, my throat's hurting, and I need a break." We'd play a minute longer one night, then the next night 2 minutes or 3, and then we'd jam out for 5 minutes or more. And that famous instrumental outro began to take form. And suddenly fans started to request this song wherever they went. By the way, just quickly, if you like my channel and want even more, I post behind the scenes stuff and I chat to all my supporters one-on-one over on my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/musicmongoose. Now, Lynyrd Skynyrd began to gain traction, and in 1972 they signed to MCA Records, and it was this label that released the band's debut album in 1973. Free Bird grabbed a spot on this album as the final track on the second side. It'd been a bit of a fight to get it on the album though. They recorded their first version of the track in the famous Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which was a lot longer at the time, which they eventually managed to reduce down to about 9 minutes. However, MCA Records, understandably, felt the track was still too long. They felt it would suffer commercially because it was too long for anyone to play on the radio. So the label requested the band to do the slow part and then fade out and finish there. Luckily though, for everyone with ears, Lynyrd Skynyrd put their foot down and said, "No, we want to include the instrumental part. It has to be this way." So they settled on a compromise. The album would get the full track, and the radio stations would get the shorter version without the full instrumental outro. Free Bird became the much anticipated last song at every Lynyrd Skynyrd gig. Fans went wild for it, loving how the song transitioned from a slow, lovey-dovey track to something they could dance to and really let loose to. During the shows, Van Zandt would dedicate it to friends they had lost along the way. The idea was that in their death, they were now free birds. Sadly, Lynyrd Skynyrd was also soon struck by tragedy. On October 20th, 1977, the band were flying between shows in South Carolina and Louisiana. Their plane sadly crashed into a Mississippi forest. 6 people were killed that day, including Van Zandt. Collins survived the crash with serious injuries, although in 1986 he was involved in a car crash that paralysed him from the waist down and put an end to his musical career. He later sadly died from complications of his paralysis in 1990. Rossington also survived the crash, although he suffered some severe injuries. He had to have steel rods inserted into his arms and legs, and had to relearn how to play the guitar. However, he did eventually make a full recovery, and in 1987 organised a Lynyrd Skynyrd reunion with surviving pre-crash members. They approached Johnny Van Zandt, Ronnie's younger brother, and a solo artist at the time, to take up the vocals. He was understandably unsure about this offer, to begin with. I had never wanted to be in the band. Lynyrd Skynyrd was going to go on with my brother forever. 10 years after the crash, I was called into a meeting. I walked into the room, and here are these guys who survived the crash with my brother. They wanted me to come on for a tribute tour. Johnny eventually agreed to join the reunion tour, but at first he felt uncomfortable singing Free Bird. It wasn't until Rossington said something to change his mind that he willingly took up the mantle. I told Gary, Ronnie is the guy who should be singing this. Then one show we came off the stage after Alabama, and Gary said, "The crowd's raising heck, and I'm not going back out there unless you sing it." He told me Ronnie was a singer and a songwriter, and the song needs to be sung. That hit me, and I've been singing it ever since. Unsurprisingly, Free Bird meant a lot to the surviving members of the band. Ronnie Van Zandt and Alan didn't live long enough to see it become a classic, but it took on a whole new meaning for their bandmates. Every night we look out at the audience and you see people singing every lyric with Johnny. At the end, everybody starts jumping up and down, and it's emotional to watch the audience do that. The song lets you think about your love or people you've lost. And the song is played everywhere from graduations to funerals and really does take on a new meaning for everyone who listens to it. The band continues to tour to this day, but not once have they forgotten the members they've lost along the way. At every gig, they display pictures of their fallen bandmates during the set as a reminder. And Free Bird, to no one's surprise, is always emotional. So despite Ronnie Van Zandt and MCA Records not being convinced at first, Free Bird became a classic in the rock genre, taking on new meanings at every corner. Johnny Van Zandt sees it as almost a memorial track, a way to remember his older brother and help him live on. I've had people say that when I first started, I wasn't as good as Ronnie. I never wanted to be as good as my brother, I just wanted to carry on his music. I'm Johnny, he was Ronnie, and that's what kept me going. We'll never forget the ones who started this. Now, if you liked that video, you probably want to have a look at my video on Sweet Home Alabama, because that song might not be what you thought it was.